how do you balance those things of finding joy in celebrating and living your life, but also like having that revolutionary spirit to fight against these attacks that are so unrelenting?
Yeah, I think for me personally, it's really about surrounding myself with chosen family in these really difficult moments in history, right? It's about like having queer and trans family to be checking in on, to be supporting, and also just to be able to focus on our joy in addition to our liberation. Because I think when we have a group of people that is constantly under attack, especially politically, especially now, without like considering why we're fighting and what our liberation is for, then I think it can feel very hopeless. So queer and trans family is the way that I personally keep myself mentally healthy during these times.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. I think that you can't have liberation without joy and without rest and without wonder and art and creativity, because if we give those things up, then they've already won. And what are we fighting for? All we're doing is fighting at that point. And I would say, the thing is about the right is they've been consistent. It might get lower and it might seem like they've backed off, but they never do. And so for me, it's realizing that the harder that I fight, the more it works for them, and the more that I find solidarity within queer community, but also outside of it, and solid class solidarity, racial solidarity, spiritual solidarity, like that is where the movement needs to continue going, is finding solidarity across these lines. So for me, Pride Month is about everybody realizing like we're all in this together, and not in the cheesy Target t-shirt, we're all in this together way of like, we literally are all stuck on this rock together. So like we gotta find each other no matter what, and like let's have some fun, and not vodka float fun, like actual real rooted deep fun, like within each other, and creating these spaces and creating the movement together, because that's what we're actively doing.
Yeah, River, I was walking through the aisles of Target and I saw their Pride themed ice cream, and I looked at it and I thought, we are all in this together. And
we
then
are. We are.
Yeah. Anyway,
this ice cream all together.
Look, I love what you said about finding solidarity across all of these lines. What I'm curious is, it sort of falls to, I don't know if you saw, but in the first segment of our special, we were speaking with Laverne Cox. And Laverne Cox was saying, considering the all-out attack, the defense, the solidarity needs to be stronger. There needs to be some sort of organized response to it. And obviously, a lot of that in the leadership is gonna come from inside of the community, but ideally, culturally, allies understanding beyond the community will also be helpful in fighting back against this. There are many, politicians on the Democratic side that maybe deep within their hearts have the right position, but they aren't necessarily doing much about it on all of this. So I'm curious, actually, from both of your point of views, how would you rate the defense at this point, the level of solidarity and the allies that are available at this point?
I mean, I'll start by saying if I'm keeping this, if my rating is going for political public servants, elected officials, I'm gonna go with a 1, because Representative Marie Newman has a trans child, so she is openly speaking about trans support. Like she literally says the word transgender on a regular basis. She has a trans flag outside of her office. Can I name that many other politicians who are actively saying the word transgender when they are speaking up to these things? Not many. Like the literal word transgender does not come out of most people who would consider themselves to be allies' mouths. And that to me is incredibly important, because it is a lacking of political will to put your money where your mouth is and actually say like, I care about transgender people because they are people. Because they're people just like you and me. And this is not about love is love anymore. This is literally about human rights. And it's not that trans rights are human rights. It's human rights are human rights, and we're human beings. And so this is unconstitutional. And so I would ask for people to literally not be afraid to say the word transgender anymore, because I feel like people still are. They feel like it's, I don't know, some political football or bomb or something, that if they say it, then they're gonna have to defend their saying it. Just say it. Full-throated solidarity is very important. And I'm sure that Laverne talked about this, but what we're living in now is the result of visibility without security and without safety and without solidarity. And the fastest way to raise that up, raise up to where we are with visibility versus safety, is material well-being, material support for the people who need it most, because most trans people in this country are not wealthy and they're not affluent and they're not Hollywood stars. They live in Missouri, they live in Mississippi, they live in Alabama, they live in Texas, and they don't have a lot of money and they need a place to live just like most Americans do in 2022.
Yeah, I just have to agree. And also, I'm sick of allies. I want active accomplices, people who are actually going to show up with tangible policies and actively defend us. I feel like so often queer and trans people literally have to show up for ourselves because no one else is coming. And that's the problem.
Yeah. I mean, look, at this point, hoping specifically for Biden or his close allies in the Democrats feels like a waste of time. But like in theory, let's say that he was watching and there was something that we could want him to step forward and do, since maybe he would punt on the Senate, he can't get anything done, but he could still pass executive orders. Is there anything that you think, especially in this moment, would be helpful, that either of you think would potentially help to push back against a little bit of what we're seeing?
I mean, in terms of executive orders, can he pass universal health care with an executive order? Because I mean, I think, honestly, like many of these laws are targeting transgender healthcare, and they're starting with kids. They found a perfect target with children, which is a sad thing to say, and it crosses all kinds of lines these days. That to regulate the healthcare of another, and there's solidarity in abortion care here, reproductive justice. We have a lot of lines we can cross and build with each other in this fight. So to me, universal healthcare is truly where it starts, because if we have universal access to free healthcare, not just free of cost, but free from regulation, then you can't be passing laws that certain people can't have this healthcare if they, within this state. If we have federal universal healthcare, that sets to me like a platform for everyone, trans and cisgender and anything in between, to have access to the same care, which I think is ultimately what we're all fighting for.
In addition to that, honestly, I have to agree. And also, I think that just having laws that protect what experts already say are the guidelines and standards of care for queer and trans children. This like across the board, there have been studies that again and again prove that gender affirming care isn't just necessary, it's life-saving. So when these politicians are targeting this with like misinformation, because the general public doesn't have a grasp on sex education broadly, let alone what trans healthcare looks like for somebody who's 13 or 14, right? So, it's really easy for politicians to sway public opinion when there isn't information. So I think education around it is deeply important, actually having comprehensive sex ed so that voters can be empowered to understand what is being sold to them is complete misinformation. And in addition to that, just protecting the guidelines that literal doctors are saying are necessary and have been in place for decades. The standards of care, trans healthcare isn't constantly evolving in terms of the standards because there isn't enough funding there anyways, but that's a whole other issue. So just supporting the standards that have been around for like 20 years would be helpful.
Can I just say, to add to that, just to throw out there for anybody that's like worried about healthcare for trans kids and like gender affirming care, just to say we do circumcisions every day. And like nobody's scared about that. Nobody's freaking out about that, So like just to offer that as the comedian, I wanted to throw that one point in there just to get people thinking a little bit.
That's true. I mean, there's a few. I get some DMs about it, but you're right. It's
of
not.
Course. And I also am in solidarity with people who wish that they had the choice to have that or not have that, because we're taking that choice away from that child in that moment. And so I, as a trans person, have like understanding and empathy for a person who wishes they had that choice. And that's what trans people are fighting for. So that's another line we get to cross with all kinds of folks.
See, now that is awesome comedy. It was funny and it also was substantive. I appreciate that. Anyway, we unfortunately are running up against the end of our time, but I wanna make sure that, especially because there's so much more that I wish we could have gotten into, that people watching this know where they can follow both of you and your work. So starting with you, River, where can people follow you?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter and Instagram. I'm at Riv Butcher on both of those. I have a stand-up half hour out on Comedy Central. It's on their YouTube. It's called A Different Kind of Dude. You can catch me on there. And then I'm also gonna be, Netflix is putting out a special like a queer special. It's coming out, I think June 14th is the date. It's like me and Rosie O'Donnell. Don't know if you've heard of her, Trixie Mattel, Bob the drag queen, just a few stars, Sam J, Mateo Lane, Joel Kim Booster, all kinds of great queer folks on that show. So check that out. That's on the 14th. And then there's a documentary coming out after that.
That's awesome. Cáne, where can people follow you?
Yeah, you can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Cáne López. You can also catch me on them.us. Any of the lifestyle content you see, that's me. We write about sex, relationships, all things queer. It's queer Wikipedia. So Go there, check it out.
Thank you to both of you. I really do appreciate it. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thanks, John. Thanks for having me.